Hey everybody out there, welcome to Advancement Live. My name is Ryan Catherwood and it is 1 o'clock on Tuesday, so it is time for another edition of Advancement Live. I'm coming to you live from the University of Virginia here in Charlottesville, Virginia. Advancement Live is part of HigherEdLive Network, which is a series of professional development web shows and podcasts, which are always free and accessible to you in the archives of higheredlive.com, or you can also download them from iTunes. Always, while we're broadcasting, be part of the conversation by tuning in and sharing your insights and questions using the hashtag HigherEdLive. You can receive weekly updates with live web show dates and times and subjects by subscribing to the HigherEdLive newsletter. Be sure to do so by visiting the higheredlive.com website. I'd like to introduce our Advancement Live sponsors. Advancement Live this week brought to you by iModules, and iModules would like to say welcome to Troy Anderson, who is the new CTO for all friends of iModules, and M. Stoner. HigherEdLive is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Sign up for a free webinar on Friday, May the 2nd, to learn about the Buzzer Higher Ed CMS. Buzzer is a CMS specifically built for small colleges and universities that desire a top-tier website strategy, well-organized content, and an attractive design. We tweeted out a link to that, and you can be sure to register. Okay, on with the show. Okay, coming up next on Advancement Live, my friend Mr. John Arboleda joins us from Barcelona, Spain. And apart from living overseas since 2004, John is an engagement expert with more than 16 years of experience in international higher education, having worked across all areas from students to alumni engagement life cycles. In 2013, John launched his own company, NOYO, which stands for NotOnYourOwn, global engagement, and he partners with clients to understand and develop engagement strategies that support and advance an institution's international strategy. Prior to NOYO, John worked at ESADE Business School in Spain, where he served as the first director of international alumni affairs. Goethe University in Germany, and started his career in education working at the University of California Office of the President. John, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation, and hello to all the listeners as well.
Pleasure to have you. I know you are a busy guy, and as you said before the show, you're headed off to the United Arab Emirates for a conference coming up, which I'm sure is very exciting. John is known internationally as an expert in global engagement. So with that in mind, John, can you talk a little bit about, for U.S. universities who are really trying to build their global engagement program, what are the benefits of a global engagement program?
Sure, because what's happening now, thanks, is that internationalization is a very popular term within universities. What does that mean? How do they define that? And what's happening is that how do you develop an integrative strategy that can also help develop an integrative strategy across an institutional's core areas that may work in international areas regarding admissions, career services, research, academia, international relations office, alumni relations, and fundraising, and knowing that academic institutions, sometimes we have limited resources, limited capacity, and how do you leverage all that? So to have an integrative strategy that can help unlock the contributions to advance internationalization. Some of those benefits that can come up regarding a much more tangible area would be in terms of recruitment. You know, campuses now and universities across the U.S. and the globe are looking to recruit the best talent, not only in terms of students, undergraduate students, master's students, postdoctorate students, faculty and staff. In terms of that, they're also needing to see how can we develop international partnerships with other institutions, because part of the internationalization is developing joint or dual degree partnerships or research partnerships with other institutions. A lot of your students now are wanting to be globally prepared and ready. So what opportunities are you providing them on campus and also to go abroad, so that when they graduate, they're also going to be really prepared to join this global workforce? And some of the other benefits would be you eventually tapping into a really global network, so that the institution itself can build its brand and reputation, and also to remain competitive as an institution moving forward as the higher ed industry is now realizing they really need to advance the work they're doing in order to be globally competitive.
Yeah, and here at the University of Virginia, they just have really ramped up the global engagement program. In fact, one of the most recent hires here at the university was a director of international internships, which I think is a really cool position that impacts a lot of different of the constituents. So what are some of the other trends that you're seeing, John, which are driving internationalization of higher education?
Yeah, I think so. It's what's happening with globalization, right? So globalization across the world is influencing the need for universities to internationalize. Global business and commerce. It means, example, multinational companies are really going to need very talented graduates who can work across borders and can adapt and work in a cross-cultural function. How do you need to prepare that? There's going to be a need for that. There's also going to be the need for the exchange of ideas. And technology is having a huge influence in how people are consuming education nowadays. And universities are trying to figure out how can we remain competitive and really deliver value with what we're doing. And I think also there's something happening in terms of the term of transnational education. When you have students who will get a degree from a home country but never be in that home country at all. They may get a degree from the University of Virginia in another country because there's a partnership that's been developed there. So even the way now how students are exchanging ideas, the technology that's there, and also the way that people are consuming this is really influencing it. Other things are regarding demographics. I was looking recently at some statistics coming from NASA and another Institute for International Education, that there was a 53% increase in the number of university students worldwide from 2000 to 2007. By 2025, it's going to increase to 150%. That's going to mean in real numbers, there's going to be 250 million university students worldwide. That's primarily coming from the emerging nations. How are universities going to be able to respond to prepare students? How are you going to be prepared to absorb these students when a lot of these countries that are producing these young future college students are going to probably look to educate themselves elsewhere, looking for new opportunities? And the last trend is the increase in student mobility. Students are now more than ever wanting to go study abroad, have a unique experience to study abroad. And just last year, it was 4.3 million students chose to have a global mobility experience to do that. And that number is going to be increasing. Recently, the U.S. government has pushed there's been a big initiative called Open Doors, where they want 600,000 students to go study abroad by the year 2020-25. Why is that? Because the U.S. is also realizing it's going to be important to have a competitive workforce in the future so that the U.S. economy or the country can remain competitive and still retain a certain position in the world. These are some of the trends that are really influencing it, and educational institutions play a big role in how they're preparing institutions, but not just preparing them, but how institutions preparing themselves to be globally competitive and relevant in the future.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of staying competitive, not just from an institutional level, but reflecting on my own experience, I really went to Australia for graduate school in order to gain a competitive advantage, I felt, as far as having that global experience. And so I think when institutions begin to craft their message as far as why to engage globally and what the constituents' needs are, I think every university has got a different level of readiness, right? And so what are some of the main ingredients needed to set up a global engagement program?
Sure. I think some of the ingredients is probably, I think that institutions need to see, one area could be, what are you going to do there's a term that's used often, it's called internationalization at home. So if you're a US-based institution, how can you internationalize what's happening on campus? And there's a couple areas in which that can happen. One of it is, what are you doing academically? What are you doing with the curriculum to make the curriculum much more international? how, with a large, being that the U.S. is the largest recipient of foreign students that want to study abroad, how are you incorporating the internationality that foreign students bring to U.S. campuses to enhance the global experience of not just fellow domestic students, but even the whole academic experience that's happening around campus? What are you doing in regard from a student services point of view, whether it's careers, advising, alumni services, program management? What are you doing in order to ensure that you are setting up structures or programs or the way that you're managing student services in a way that can also enhance the international experience both ways, and the way that foreign students can have a great positive experience at a U.S. campus, that also that staff, faculty, local students, the community in which the campus is located in can also benefit from the internationality that these students or foreign professors may bring to that as well. And there's also things related to the off-campus engagement. The other ingredients, that would be one area of internationalization at home. Another area could be international mobility. I think there has to be a bigger push, and I was happy to see the push coming from the U.S. to have more students study abroad, but I think there's also a need to have staff mobility going abroad. Not just, there's a lot happening in terms of faculty exchanges, but I think staff going abroad as well, and building these great valuable networks that can also be a return on investment for institutions for future partnerships or exchanges that could happen. And then I think we also have to remember that institution is also teaching and preparing students, but many institutions their research is important that they're producing. And so one of the ingredients as well is what are you doing in terms of international relations? You want to have, one thing is to have exchange agreements where students can study in each other's institutions across borders, but you're going to want partners for joint and dual degrees. They're going to be important, joint research opportunities. And probably what I'm beginning to see here in Europe as well is the Netherlands, for example, works very closely with their Ministry of Education, with their embassies abroad, with their chambers of commerce. So the partnerships that institutions are developing are even expanding traditional partnerships to really tap into things that the country as a whole is focusing on in terms of their international needs and where they're going. You know, if certain countries focusing in Asia because that's strategically important for partnerships for a country, universities should also be looking at that. And universities in the U.S. should be looking, where are international students coming from? And what's strategically important for us based on where we want to be as an institution? Those are some of the three ingredients: internationalization at home, the mobility of staff, students, and faculty, and the international relations aspect of how a university can tap into that to expand partnerships that add to that internationalization.
That's great, John. And I think that there's no shortage of opportunity, right? I imagine not too long ago we had the privilege of hosting Jade Bressington, who is one of the alumni managers at the University of Birmingham in England. And it was great to exchange information from the staff level. Great to build connections and have the opportunity to collaborate. So there's all sorts of opportunities. What are some of the potential obstacles here as far as building a global engagement program?
I think one of the biggest obstacles is that you think it's just going to come to you. That there's too much of a narrow view that we're international because the number of international students we have on our campus. Right? That's too much of a narrow view. I think that really one of the obstacles is that it's not about internationalization coming to you, but it's what are you doing outbound, right? If you want to be a competitive higher ed institution, what's going to be your strategy to engage the globe outside your borders, beyond that? And that there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy to this. Because usually what I try to do when I work with clients and tell institutions is that internationalization is not the goal, but it's usually going to be the means to achieve several goals. Because the needs of what academics are going to need in research in regarding to internationalization will be different than the recruitment in the admissions office, than the careers office in terms of employability and internships and job placements. And it's going to be different in terms of the marketing and brand building. So I think it's really important that institutions are going to be able to change their mindset, and that it's not about the experience that I had as an international student, or what I think it's about. But it's really seeing the global terrain and seeing what's happening out there, and being able to develop an overarching internationalization strategy that's not a one-size-fits-all, but that even within these the different areas within a university campus will have a subset of their own internationalization strategy that really is going to be important regarding their needs and what they have, but that contributes to somehow an overarching institutional internationalization strategy. And I think the other thing I would add is I don't think for universities that really want to be competitive internationally, this is not about if we should do it, it's about when are you going to start doing it, because this is going to be really important, and the higher education landscape is becoming extremely competitive because there's a lot of new entrants into the market that are really competing, offering English language programs outside English-speaking countries. Non-academic institutions now offering courses, because do people want an education or do they want training? So I think there's kind of this disruptive shift in higher education we talked about, and a lot of that, and internationally, how is a university going to be relevant 20, 30, 40 years from now? Not only preparing their own students, but also in having an impact on what they're doing.
That's great. Thanks, John. And sort of last question for you. You may have already sort of touched on it. Is it kind of maintaining a level of competitive advantage or keeping up as far as why you believe it's important for U.S. institutions to have a global engagement program?
You know what? I think for each institution, part of them developing a global engagement program, it's really got to be driven by objectives. You know, what are your objectives that you want? And behind that, you develop a strategy, and then you got to look at your resources and your capacity, and what are you going to be needing, right? So it's not what the other neighbors are doing. Each institution has to look at that respectively. But why is it important, I think, for the U.S. institutions? I mentioned that there's new competitors coming in to the higher education field, and they're not all academic institutions. There is more English language programs, and I see that here in Europe, even within Spain and across Europe, and traveling as well, English language programs are popping up. It's from a business side, it's a big market as well. The other thing is that universities that are in the U.S. that are part of the U.S., they need to think about how are we preparing our workforce to be competitive in a global market, because now a lot of careers, you can have a career on a domestic level, but what about this young generation of students? It's about, I'm going to want an international experience. They know a lot more about the world with technology and what's out there. And how can you prepare them beyond a study abroad program to be competitive? You know, this is something that I've seen in my own personal experience being abroad 10 years, is my transition from being a local to national, to international, to global, is something that occurred to me on a very personal and a professional level. And now I think universities are really needing to understand how they follow that same transition from local, national, international, and becoming more global. Not just global to be to be financially viable and still be around, but also to realize that they can have an impact in preparing domestic students, but also be a place where the foreign students are going to want to come and be connected. And I think that it's going to be important as a nation as well, that workforce is going to be prepared and competitive and contribute to the economy, to the leadership, to geopolitical areas. There's much larger implications, and this is why I think you're seeing central governments in the UK, now in the US, and in other areas really supporting higher ed institutions in internationalization, in globalization, because of the role universities have in society and how important they are. So I think these are some of the reasons why there's a lot of talk happening about this, why institutions are really beginning to develop this. But I think you've got to be smart in how you're going to develop your global engagement program and leveraging the resources and the capacity that you have to really have a strategy that produces outcomes and results based on the objectives that each institution has set forth. And so this is what I'm seeing right now.
Great job, John. Thank you very much for joining us today on Advancement Live. Look forward to catching up with you soon after you've returned from your business trip over to Abu Dhabi, and look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Just the mere fact that we can communicate and do a broadcast like this with yourself living over in Barcelona is sort of a testament to how important it is to develop a global engagement program and at a personal and professional and educational level. So thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you guys having this topic. I think it's an important topic. I've got a series of speaking engagements around the globe, and it's interesting. This is a topic that's coming up, international engagement. I think institutions are trying to figure out how to do this. So I'm glad that you covered this important topic, and thank you for the opportunity. Have a nice afternoon. No, you're morning. You have a nice afternoon.
Thanks, John. Take it easy. Until the next time. Thank you to our viewers who joined us today on Advancement Live. My name is Ryan Catherwood. The podcast will be available later on this evening or tomorrow for downloading and your listening pleasure on your mobile device. Please do tune in Tuesdays 1 p.m. either myself or Andrew Gosen up at Cornell University. Try to put on a great episode of Advancement Live for you. So again, for Ryan Catherwood coming to you from the University of Virginia, thanks a lot for listening and have a great day.